Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. You are listening to a podcast by Pastor Eric Cepin and Pastor Andy Littleton. If you enjoy Faith Over Breakfast, we encourage you to rate it on the Apple Podcast app, on Spotify, or Google Play. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Checkity check. Hey,
right.
Andy.
Hey, how's it going?
We did a podcast a long time ago that people are about to hear.
That's right. So, welcome to Faith Over Breakfast.
Yes, welcome to Faith Over Breakfast.
My name is Andy from Mission Church in Tucson, Arizona. I'm sitting here with Eric from The Village.
The Village.
In Tucson, Arizona. And today's podcast is a special one because we got to sit down with Mike Moore and David Fitch of Theology on Mission. And I've gotten to know Mike. He's a Chicago friend of mine. In fact, I invited him to see the Pirates with me this weekend. When I will be flying to Chicago, he will be simultaneously flying the opposite direction to Phoenix.
Oh.
So we can't do that. But I've gotten to know Mike, and you were listening to Theology on Mission, their
For a
podcast.
long time,
Yeah. And when we discovered that, we thought, well, what if we tried this out as a dual podcast concept?
So we gave it a try. It was interesting.
Yeah. That was fun.
You and I did it from our computers.
Yeah.
They did it with
Their
mics in there.
Oh, they had
their nice mics. We had computer mics. So
I actually had a microphone off
yours
to the
is
side
a little bit better, but it was very low.
It wasn't. I probably wasn't talking as directly into it as I should have.
I did not have a mic because I was at my bedroom.
Oh.
Well, in my office.
So they sound better than us.
They do. Point. They sound better.
You know, that's fine.
Because they are better.
There you go.
And you should listen to their podcast, Theology on Mission. It's good. It's quick. It's fun to listen to.
Right.
Dave Fitch.
Yeah.
Dr. Dave Fitch.
Yeah.
You'll get to hear a lot of him. He's awesome.
He's got a lot of thoughts.
He does have a lot of thoughts.
But enjoy the podcast. We were excited about it, and we think you're going to enjoy it. So that's what's coming up. And enjoy.
Enjoy.
Question: How serious do you want this? How much can we joke around? Fitch and Moore are used to goofing off a little bit, and yet getting serious when need be. What do you want us to do?
I want you to be the Fitch that you are.
You
can do that.
Okay, I'm ready to go when you are, guys.
Let's do this thing.
Okay. Okay, so I once had a beer on the roof in Chicago with Mike Moore, and that was the first time we really hung out, and that was a great evening. And we've had a couple chances to spend time together. Really enjoy the guy, and I knew he did a podcast with a man named David Fitch, who, has written a book or two, is out there, is a little bit on the scene. So when I got home to record a Faith Over Breakfast with my buddy Eric, he told me about listening to this podcast he loves with David Fitch and Mike Moore. And I said, Mike Moore? I know that guy. And he said, you know Mike Moore? Do you know David Fitch? And I said, no, I don't know David Fitch. I don't know.
I love this. I love this story so much.
Yeah.
I love this.
Yeah. Other than Mike Moore. Yeah. And it's, it was almost one of those things like, how many degrees are you from Kevin Bacon? And I was like, I'm just 1 degree closer to David Fitch than you are, Eric. But there's a chance we could all talk sometime, and let's just see what happens. And so sent a little message over to Mike and said, hey, what do you think about Faith Over Breakfast? That's our podcast. Combining with what they're doing. And he said, sure, let's try it. And we've been trying for like 3 months in email, and look at that. We made it happen. So that's kind of what's going on. But our audiences don't necessarily know each other. We have a wide-ranging audience, many listeners in Japan over the years at Faith Over Breakfast. Really, there are a couple in Japan. I'm still trying to figure that out.
Nice.
But no, we've just been, Eric and I have been meeting as two pastors. Our theory is, wouldn't it be, if you saw two pastors at breakfast, eating, don't you wish you could listen in on that conversation of what they really talk about? And that's our podcast, is we just sit down and we talk like at a breakfast table, and people get to sit in. So Mike and David, what's your podcast about? And how did you first hear of Eric Cepin? That's really probably the question.
I think for both of us, this is our first time meeting Eric Cepin, the man, the myth, the legend, and we're happy to be on a call with him. Fitch, do you want to do the tagline for Theology on Mission
Theology
podcast?
on Mission podcast, ladies and gentlemen, where theology meets the challenges of culture for mission, Christ and his kingdom. How is that? Okay. How is that, Mike Moore?
It's good. That's one of your better ones. And a little backstory. You know, Andy, I don't know if I told you this, but that night you spent on my roof overlooking the city, I think I had played soccer.
Yeah.
That night, I had sprained my ankle so bad that the next morning it was like black and blue, and I wasn't able to like run for about 3 months.
Whoa.
But that night with you,
remember this?
Yeah, the night with you, that was all the medicine I needed. So I've recovered since then.
Hey,
wow.
I have a quick question. Can I interject a quick question?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Oh, why have I never been? I've known Mike Moore for 20 some years when he was a baby.
Yeah.
Why have I never been invited to the roof? I am really upset right now.
It was concern. We had to climb a ladder, and there were concerns about your knees. And Beth Moore told you that you have to get your knees replaced last week.
That's a whole nother story. We don't want to go there.
I
don't want to go there unless you're Pentecostal. We don't want to go there. And I am a Pentecostal.
With a seatbelt.
It was a treacherous climb. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. I'm surprised that Mike didn't further injure himself on that climb. Yeah,
and I also understand that you two went to a Cubs playoff game. All right, I'm not a Cubs fan. I'm a White Sox fan. But why have I never been invited to a Cubs playoff game? A playoff game is worth going to, period. I'd go.
You used to live in Wrigleyville. You used to live right blocks from Wrigley Field, no?
True.
Yeah. I feel like this is a missed opportunity.
And I never went to a Cubs game.
That is a missed opportunity. Yeah, and here's the truth: is when the Cubs were in the playoffs, White Sox fans had nothing to do at that time. You had nothing going on.
We still have nothing to do.
Yeah. Well, Murakami hit a home run on opening day. That's nice.
That's interesting that that they lost 15-2 or something like that. But that's interesting that that little piece of information.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, here we are on a podcast where the conversation is going absolutely nowhere. No one knows why they're here. Where are we going, Andy? Eric, can you pipe in, because this podcast is losing momentum, and you seem to be the man with direction.
Yeah, I am the man with direction. Well, let me just tell you a little bit about myself, since I'm the man of the mystery. Like, I planted a church 25 years ago here in Tucson. I was kind of in the beginnings of the emerging movement. So when Mark Driscoll was a nobody, I actually knew him, and Brian McLaren, and a bunch of those, Doug Padgett, all the, I kind of had my teeth in that world. And then that world blew up. And a lot of the people who planted churches in those days are not there anymore. So our church is still around.
Mike, you know how Fitch always drops the kind of church he's in these days? This is Eric's version.
This is my drop. Here's my drop, is that we started in that world. And we have like a little bit, our tagline in our community is that we're a neo-monastic mega house church. So we have about we have about 5,000 to 6,000 square foot place that's set up like a home. So you walk in, there's a big, huge kitchen. Our sanctuary is full of couches. And it's a very monastic kind of church. And everything, we kind of do everything the hard way. So we reinvent everything. We write all our own music. We build out all our own discipleship materials. To do all that, I have to, and to be in that kind of space. It's funny. I'm an ordained Christian Reformed pastor, who's
oh boy, here we go.
Who's not very Reformed. So I don't know how I managed to get into that. I snuck in, and here I am because they love me. That's the thing. Like I have learned about it, particularly the Christian Reformed Church, is that they are one of the more loving, open-handed, open-armed kind of communities. And so they walked alongside our community for 10 years before we even had any association with them.
And I should say, I've had a similar experience with that group, and I think that is a regional reality in the western part of the states and down in the Southwest. That not there, you might have a listener who says, "Well, I grew up in that tradition." Geez Louise, I don't remember that. But in our area, that is very true.
Yeah. Eric, did you run into Kevin Scuddy at all when you were in church planting?
Yes. Yeah, I've met him.
I had a call with him the other day.
Kevin's a graduate of our doctorate in contextual theology program. Okay. And of course, Mike Moore is famously a CRC or was, or I don't know what is. I guess he got kicked out. I don't know what the problem is there. But anyways, we do love the CRC, folks, even though Fitch has some reservations.
Yeah.
Piper and Kuyperian Reformed theology. We Pentecostals don't get along with, we get along on an interpersonal level, just not a theological level.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
What does it mean to live a life of faith? What does it mean to live as a Catholic Christian? Hi, this is Bishop Kevin Sweeney, host of the podcast Beyond the Beacon. Join me as we unravel and discuss the mysteries of our faith, of the church, of living as Catholic Christians. Be inspired by engaging interviews with priests and seminarians, deacons, religious, women and men who live the life of faith day by day here in our Diocese of Paterson, in food pantries and classrooms and parishes and ministry. How is God working in their lives today? How is God working in our lives? Join me as I ask them and be part of the conversation on Beyond the Beacon. Listen and follow Beyond the Beacon wherever you get your podcasts or watch it on my YouTube channel. Please check the show notes for more details. Thank you and God bless you.
Yeah. And I mean, and my church is not a Christian Reformed church because, my co-pastor came out of the Methodist movement. I grew up in the Brethren movement, so my theological roots are in those spaces.
Are we talking Plymouth Brethren?
Yes, Plymouth.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Yeah, that's where my dad became a Christian. And
we're understanding things more and more. That it gives us, everybody's a product of a history. So
yes, this is true.
Yes.
This is beginning to go exactly the direction I wanted it to go, by the way, which is exciting for me, which is where Fitch gets really interested in Eric's church and background and just starts drawing all out. So keep it up.
I think the thing is I got introduced, I ran across your guys' podcast, partly because I'm just always looking for people who think the same way I do, or somewhere along those lines. And so your Faithful Presence book, I picked that up, read it, and was like, oh, this sounds like my dad. So I gave it to him and then had our whole leadership go through it together. And it fit very well with what we do as a community already and helped kind of build out and gave some language to some of the things that we were already doing. So, gosh, I think we did that about 5 years ago. We walked through but then I just enjoy listening to you. I mean, that's really, and to your long theological
banter.
I'm trying to have a word for that thing.
Banter.
Sometimes, a lot of times, it's like going over my head, and I'm trying to get it to come down to the
I apologize.
No, that's all right. It's okay. But,
so I wrote a book a long time ago. I commonly, affectionately refer to it as my angry book, but it was entitled "The Great Giveaway: How the Church Reclaiming the Mission of the Church from All These Various Isms." And I got pulled into the emerging church movement for a while with my, at that time, co-pastor of Life on the Vine, Jeff Holzclaw, and Paget, Tony Jones, Brian McLaren, all those people. We're hanging around them a lot. And so you and I have some similar roots. And, of course, I started to write and think. Now Hauerwas, of course, is never going to be removed as the key influence theologically in my life. but I I just found some lacuna. That's a word. That's a favorite word of, I don't know, Alistair McIntyre. I looked empty holes that didn't make sense. You couldn't. I was lost, and so uh, although I really do love those guys. I go, oh, I can't go the way of Protestant liberalism. I can't do it because I've been there before, and I went straight to hell. I literally, I mean, literally, it couldn't save me from hell. It actually made it worse. That's a whole story. Mike Moore's heard my biography 152 times by now, but and so when that whole movement started, what in my opinion was naively going in that direction, I go, no, I'm out of here. So that's a little bit of my story. Do have great affection for some of those dudes, and most of them were dudes. Most of them were white dudes. By the way, there's a little lesson. Most of them were white dudes. I got a long story there because now I'm in I know Mike Moore thinks I'm pumping my street cred on this, but it's just the truth. I'm in a majority black church now. I'm pastoring in this church. I am one of one white dude amongst 18 or 19 black leaders. So anyways, I have learned so much at this advanced age. Let me say this. I knew some of it before, but now I see it. Like I can't take my eyes off of it. What God does through the stories and the histories and the theologies that emerge from people who are not in white affluent spaces. And so I've told people I'll never go back to planning churches. Sorry, guys. I know you're all white and affluent and in this room, and so am I. But I'll never go back to planting churches like that again. Judge me, correct me. I submit to all of you if I need to be rebuked, especially by Mike Moore, because I'm used to it. I'm used to being rebuked nonstop from Mike Moore, one of my three bosses.
No rebuke, maybe just a correction or a point of nuance, and maybe by way of a question.
Don't let that fool you, ladies and gentlemen who are listening all across the world, all 10 of you. Mike Moore is going to rebuke me. That's his way.
Here comes the rebuke.
Just trying to draw the conversation out a little more, get Andy and Eric's opinion on this. But I think when you say you wouldn't plant again like that, I think what you're referring to is you wouldn't plant with kind of post-evangelical, ex-evangelical types.
Angry, social justice-driven white people. I should probably be careful here, folks. All right, I'm throwing a lot of people.
Yeah. No, I mean we're not talking about. I don't think we're talking about certain individuals. I think we're just talking about kind of a posture in response to faith. Sure. I wonder for you, Eric. I lived in that emergent world for a little while as well, and sadly, some of those folks have really distanced themselves from the church for a variety of reasons. And I know, Andy, you kind of danced in that world a bit, maybe not as prevalent. But for you, Eric, why do you think your church has stuck around and stuck it out rather than just kind of walking away from it?
Well, part of it is, I think we were really rooted in community and commitment to each other. So early on, I bought a house with a couple other couples, which I still live in. So I've been living there for 28 years, raised my family with another family. A lot of the people in our community move into neighborhoods together, live in community together, are committed to living life, and the underpinnings theologically and I would say psychotheologically really come because my parents, who are big time, have been in tons of ministry, were trained by both Dan Allender and Crabb, and in particular, Dr. Crabb has had a huge impact on me, both theologically and psychologically, and that's where my background is. I worked in mental health for a long time before I started. well, not for a long time, for 5 years, but so that commitment to honesty and the commitment to transparency has helped me, because I actually ended up going down the same stream, getting to the point where I'm, beginning to really wrestle with the resurrection and how I'm going to deal with that, and being in that crowd and being like, I just can't go down this road, and having a community is saying, no, we can't go down this road, was helpful.
Eric, I need to know this road. What could you just expand on that?
The going basically to a more liberal approach theologically to things, and really understanding that, like, the point where I sitting in a group of men, white men again, and having a conversation about the resurrection being simply a spiritual thing and kind of a new age experience, really, and that we could connect to the spirit of God, and that's all that was important. And I just was like, I can't go down this road like this, and having a community is like, yeah, we're not going down this road.
I think a key thing for the village, Eric, I mean, it is what you're saying, but I just want to phrase it a little more simply, maybe from an outsider, is so what Larry Crabb, I think, really believed in and tried to promote was that the people of the church would deeply know and minister to one another, and do the work that, the therapist, in a way, often ended up doing, but that a community could really embody that. And I think the village is one of the few churches, if not the only one I know, that's actually taken that and said, that is what we are going to do. We're going to care for each other at that level. So then when there's that much deep connection, I don't think the village was, like what Eric's saying is, when he started to kind of like explore all these things, he couldn't do it alone. That was not an option in the church that they had built. And so when people at the village have feedback and are wrestling with things, he is so embedded with them that their viewpoint, their thoughts, their hearts have to be a factor. He's not leading like apostolically in that regard, where like they're just like, whatever you say. I mean, they've developed a community where they really sit down and pray, and they could tell him he needs to retire, and he would actually consider that if they said so. Yeah, it's unique in that way. And I think that's a huge piece of what's going on there.
This kind of blows my mind, because I so affirm this idea of moving into a neighborhood and being community together. And I might even say the Larry Crabb thing, which it's been a long time since I read Larry Crabb, but that sounds so like what we were doing. We had a community we called it Metanoia, coming out of a mega church when I was in my 30s, and that's what we were doing. Now, here's a question, Eric. So much of that was healing to me, really transforming to me. By that I mean gathering together as a community, worshiping together, but being a community together and supporting and loving one another. And we had groups, we called them safe place groups back then, and a lot of what we did was what a typical therapist group would do. Sure. Of course, since I was trained by Howard Watts, I always said, well, we got to bring it back to Jesus. So here's my question with that, because what I found in the ensuing years, and we planted a church off of that group, which became Life on the Vine. In the ensuing years, I found there were those who wanted to go therapeutic all the way, reject church, which I understand why they wanted to reject church. But in the process, Jesus became kind of a principle or a moral, aspirational thing, but not the center of what was going on in their lives. Therapy became that center. And what I found is they really, 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 a lot of them really went off the deep end. And so I had to do a corrective there. And in fact, I've been doing a corrective there ever since, and it's now 20 some years later. In fact, in the book The Great Giveaway, I wrote a chapter on how therapy had replaced discipleship, and I said the need for more preaching in the psychologist's office, and that really pissed a whole bunch of people off. But anyways, which is kind of my modus operandi.
Yeah, I've noticed.
But Eric, have you experienced any of what I just talked about?
Yeah, I have. And in fact, I've been in the process of writing a book to kind of help people. We have a discipleship process that is Christocentric in the way that we work through things with people. And because what the emerging movement and really what the missional movement brought for me was an outward focus. And so that helped with that, because an outward focus has to be very Christocentric. And when you're walking into the neighborhood and asking, what is Jesus doing here? So we're doing that outwardly. Inwardly, you're asking, what is Jesus doing here? So it's always focused on the action of Jesus and joining him in that. It's much more helpful. So there are things that we can bring in with the understanding of people, how they operate, what emotions do, all those kinds of things. But it's always back to Jesus as the center, and having a really good understanding of the gospel and what it means to live in the gospels themselves, and to kind of the dirt and mud of walking with Jesus. And so that's kind of where we're at with that.
Yes.
Eric's mother, both of his parents, but his mother wrote a lot on and led groups that really went like deep into the interior life, but asking questions of like, where was Jesus in these moments of pain? And
yes,
I think her influence, like Eric is, that there was always like, there's ways he's so different from his mother, but ways that like was so formed. And I think that like those questions maybe are different from what you experienced, Fitch. Like for Eric, for the Cepin family, for his family, that it never went like therapeutic without Jesus. Like Jesus and the work of Jesus was always very core. And I think that influence has shaped the village in a major way. I'm sure there's more to it than that, Eric, but what do you think of that?
That's true.
Yeah.
I want to just tell everybody on listening to this show, all 10 people, because we've now doubled our audience, right?
We have 5 and you have 5.
Yeah. After seminary, and I've told this story a million times, so people, if you're listening, just give me 3 minutes if you've already heard it. But I went, after seminary, I couldn't see myself being a pastor. I went, it's a long story, but I went to University of Miami, got some economics. With 2 courses in economics, I got into the financial business, and before you know it, I'm pretty darn good at it. And before you know it, I'm getting sucked into the vortex of evil itself. And I saw everything I saw it all: greed, lust, sexuality, commodification of bodies, money as the sole reason to live every day. It was suffocating, and I was going down a whirlpool of hell. I was being sucked into it, and I saw myself going to hell, and I got saved. In Pentecostalism, you can get saved twice, and the first time was 5 years old. The second time I was 30 and a half. And I'm telling you, then I decided I've got to figure out culture, because my inherited Christianity, which was kind of holiness, Pentecostal, evangelicalism, I had nothing I could not walk my way through this. And I went to Northwestern University in Chicago, the Garrett School, Seminary. There was about 8 theologians on faculty with Northwestern. It was the most liberal place. And here's what they all wanted me to do: get more in touch with yourself, get in touch with the Spirit, be true to yourself, have an experience, trust your experience, the experience of God. I go, you've got to be kidding me. I am drowning in living hell, and you're asking me to trust living hell to get me out of hell. And that's, if people are wondering, why is Fitch so got a church world distinction that's so clear for him, or we want to blur it? Don't get me wrong. Jesus is at work in the world. Jesus is at work, but the text is 1 Corinthians 15:25. He shall reign over the whole world until all enemies have been made subject. The devil and Satan and evil. So if you're living today and you're wondering what's going on at the White House, if you're living today and wondering how it's so polluted in this country, it's because the battle ain't over yet and we're living in the middle of it. And I can't be so naive as to think I just need a better, truer experience of myself and I'll get out of this. We need Jesus. Is there an amen? Mike
Amen.
Moore.
How did you get a job in a black church, Fitch? I do not understand. How did you do it?
That story would take the rest of the podcast, and you'll have to have me back on.
I think you just showed us. I think that was
good.
So there you go.
So I have a couple questions. One I have for Mike. Like, how did you, and I know maybe that you can't talk about all this, but how did you end up as the dean of seminary? Like, was that a dream of your life? Like,
oh boy, that's a great question. That's a really good question. I can answer that a couple of different ways. Certainly not a dream. I make the joke that I feel like a camp counselor who happens to be the dean of a seminary. Camp counselor I think that's kind of I shouldn't say my energy, but I'm highly relational. I like working with young people. I like convening folks. I'm a little apostolic. And in this season of life, it's relying a little more on administrative giftings that I think I'm slowly discovering that I have. And I've told this to many people at Northern, at least for this call right now for the institution, is, praying through it. And I feel like the Lord kind of gave me this vision of like the binding of a book. The pages turn, but you need some consistency. You need some binding in the book.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's my place right now. And maybe that'll be my place next 20, 30 years at Northern. Who knows? But I'll riff off of something you said there, Eric. As you're kind of giving a testimony of your ministry, my connection at Northern is in 1993, I was at Northern's graduation watching my dad walk across the stage to get his doctorate of ministry. So, now to be 30 plus years later, to be the person on the stage who's calling people's names, with their kids at commencement, it does feel a little bit like a full circle moment.
Sure.
But what I really want to point to is not just like my work at Northern, but my ministry, pastoral work. I have this strong sense that you don't get to just make it up, that you are receiving something that is, you're inheriting something that's been passed down to you. Mm-hmm. And I hear that a little bit with your call, with your family, but also even theologically, what we're saying is that you don't get to just blow it all up and make it up. Mm-hmm. There is a tradition across time and space. I mean, even as Gentiles, right, we've been grafted in. If we're reading scripture well, we are inheriting something. So we don't get these like social sciences that are just coming out of nowhere, right? They are disciplines that have been shaped in a certain way. And we don't get to just glom onto them and say, well, we're going to blow this up, or we're going to do it like this now. Mm-hmm. There's a certain hubris there where you think you can just, reinvent Christianity. So I think there's a posture of humility that comes with, being a follower of Jesus. You don't get to make it up. You receive it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really cool.
But we were at this Kairos moment at Northern Seminary. Kairos moment. We were at this crisis. We had a fiasco going on here in terms of leadership. That's all I'll say at this moment without losing another listener. But you were there, and we needed somebody to pull the pieces back together again and knit the whole thing. And that was a lot of hard work. But you have the administrative skill, but you're also a little how do I put this, blunt, direct. You're one of these rare people that like speak the reality you're seeing and go, what are we gonna do? You either gotta go this way or no way. And so Mike Moore's had an amazing impact on pulling Northern Seminary out of a leadership mess and putting us back on the tracks again. Way to go, Mike Moore.
Yeah, well, it's kind of you to say. But, the pivot again into the church there for me is, at Northern we've had our problems, so I'm always asking, how am I part of the problem that I complain about? Because I'm a product of Northern Seminary through and through. Being raised in churches with pastors that were trained there, and then going to Northern, now working at Northern, I think about the same thing with the church, which is how am I part of the problem I complain about in the church? I'm a product of the church, and I don't have the luxury to just like blow it all up and walk away.
Right. Yeah.
I think actually I talked about this on a podcast on Wednesday. Jonathan Tran, he riffs off of Luke Brotherton, these political theologians, and John's doing some work and he's talking about ex-evangelicals, post-evangelicals, and he comes to this point where he asks this question: what did you think was going to happen when it comes to the church? What do you think was going to happen in the church? There's not there's not a place where things don't get messed up in the church. This is part and parcel of the work.
Right.
And we can certainly walk away, but there's a fuller discipleship. There's some formative, like transformational work that the Lord can do if you lean into those gaps, but those pain points. That's actually where the Spirit really works out in our lives and in our neighborhoods. So
yeah, that's really good.
Yeah,
thank you.
So good.
One of my questions for Mike feels like it might insert well here, which was having been in the seminary space as long as you have, what's your favorite version? The way I phrased it, because I was trying to be, I was going to say if you could wave the magic wand and recreate seminary, but I decided instead of magic wand to call it, if you could like wave a spiritual fleece. I felt like that.
I like that.
Felt a little better. But yeah, if you could, seeing where seminary seems to be headed and what you wish it could be, even if it feels impossible, like what would your dream for the future of seminary education be?
That's so good. I actually got up not really early this morning. I did go to a coffee shop at 7 a.m. I've become the guy who's like outside the coffee shop waiting for the 20-year-old barista to open. This barista opened the door, didn't see me approaching, and then they went into the bathroom for like 10 minutes because they're probably like, nobody's gonna be here. So it was just me in a coffee shop for 10 minutes by myself.
Hey, bro, McDonald's opens at 5 o'clock every morning.
I am betraying my bouginess right now. I repent. But I went early because I kind of need some free space to like pray. Honestly, think about some Northern things. I was trying to whiteboard some stuff, and there's numbers involved. I'll say this: I have the conviction that every church is a seminary. The question is whether or not it's a good seminary.
Interesting.
Because everybody's doing theological education. in some form, some fashion. I think, and this is going to be strong, I think some of it's garbage. When I see Christian nationalism and I see churches that are worshiping the flag, that's theological education. And I think it's just garbage. I don't think that's good. I think both of you, Andy and Eric, are doing theological education every single week. So the vision and the hope that I have for Northern is that we are becoming more embedded in churches. And we absolutely are a school, and there's credentialing that comes with that. And there's papers, there's tests, there's that work. But I would love to imagine churches that could say, we're this church and we're, I don't know, this is a little commercially, we're powered by Northern Seminary, or like in partnership with Northern Seminary. And I would love if we could have theologians in residence of Northern Seminary, but they would be the pastors. So we would have a consortium of, we have 25 theologians in residence across North America. They are pastors who are doing really good work in those cities or in those rural areas, suburbs. And they are partnered with Northern Seminary because we have a very specific call for how we do theological education. And we're doing that side by side with these congregations. So that's my fleece.
That's interesting. I've never been away to college or seminary in my life. I've never gone to a campus and been at school since high school. And one of when I first came to Chicago, I was in a program, but I was embedded in a church there as an intern while I was in the program. Then when I got an MDiv, I actually did a self-paced program while I was a youth minister, and it was a very dense theological program. But it's like I would read like a section of Francis Turretin, and then I'd sit down with 3 fifth graders at McDonald's who just wanted to talk about how annoying their sister was, and I always had to ask immediately, like, what does this say to this kid, and then the program I've been working through now is a cohort of, started out with like 16, it's down to 8 people who are together for 4 years, but we're all missional practitioners, some in church, some not, who meet in a living room once a week. And so I've over the years thought, as I've compared that experience that I've had with what other people have had, I've thought I didn't mean to sign up for that version, but it's been way, I think, more rich for me because I've never not been in a context that begged the question, what does this mean to this person immediately? Yeah. And I think that's just one piece of what you're saying, but it's felt like my education has always had to engage the community I've been in at every level.
That's really good.
Mike Moore, one of the worries or concerns about that model is that, and one of the worries or concerns that Northern Seminary can answer is churches tend to become silos, echo chambers. Churches tend to reinforce their own theological. We just had Bo Lim on the podcast yesterday, and the problems with traditions is they become enclosed and unaware of their own weaknesses, and they become segregated from the culture. And so churches tend to become that way. I mean, generally speaking, you have 1 or 2 pastors who lead it theologically, lead it out of their own stream, and streams are good, but they become myopic. And Northern Seminary, one of the seminaries become this way too. You have Protestant mainline liberal seminaries. You have fundamentalist evangelical right wing seminaries. You have and seminaries can become this place where people bring their traditions into dialogue, conversation, development. This is what a good theological education is. It's always a dialogue with others in a community where God uses that community by the Holy Spirit to develop us further into extending the theological insights of the gospel into new places and new turf. Do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I do think Northern's pretty special in that regard, how we try to cross disciplines. I mean, I will say my education at Northern was disruptive in the best way, because we had we had students from a lot of different streams, and I do think that there's a requirement that to be faithful, to be a faithful Christian in your time and place, is to ensure that you are butting up against other cultural contexts. I mean, it's a little fascinating on this call just to kind of hear like what's going on in Arizona. I mean, we were making some jokes in some Arizona jokes before we started up, but there's things that Andy and Eric, that you're saying, and Eric, as you're describing your church, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, man, I don't know if that could happen in Chicago. Maybe it could. I mean, what do you think, Fitch? Do you think like neo-monastic mega church, is that how you describe it, Eric?
Mega house church, yeah.
Mega house church.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so fascinating to me. But I'm guessing there's a certain way that would operate in your context that it might look very different in my context.
Over the last 25 years of my ministry, maybe 30 years now, I have learned. I used to actually think that I could bring my preconceived, prescribed, call it a model of the way of doing church, and bring it into a context, and this will work anywhere. What I have learned is that it's not true. I bring what I bring. Like, I'm in a majority black church now. I had to. And I was just talking to a Latino church on the north side of Chicago Wednesday as well. And he was talking about how he couldn't do A, B, and C to a Hispanic immigrant congregation. It would not connect. It would. And so I believe out of our dialogue with where we are, what streams we are caught in, we bring theological insights, and we shall engage a community, and it will look uniquely specific and brilliant. And this is what contextual theology's taught me. It will not renege on 1 ounce of faithfulness to the gospel, but it will look different from place to place. So I don't know if we could do what Eric does in Chicago, but I'm going to say I'm going to have to find out, and I can't prescribe whether it will or will not. Go ahead, Eric.
And I think two things. It's not just Chicago, though. It's like Eric's bringing a very specific story of his formation to bear on a very specific community, right? It's like I think sometimes we are afraid of like how much we put on the leader, and I get that, but also like the person who's leading brings. There's no way around it. They bring their story, and their personality and their history to bear on that community, and the idea that you can franchise this out. I agree with you, Fitch, that's not. I think there can be. We could take cues, but
I think you're right, and I would wrong at the same time. And that I think everybody, no matter what culture you're coming to, is asking, am I loved and do I matter? And Jesus answers that. And so you walk into a particular place with particular people, and they ask that question a particular way. But also, I think because we are creative human beings, like because we are created in God's image, and an expression of being an image bearer is to create, what I have found in most churches is that we have offloaded that part to the kind of corporate world to produce all of our creativity and do it all for us. So none of us, our congregations don't have to do the hard work of theology themselves. It's actually just spoon-fed to them. And so I think, yes, it would look different if you did it in Chicago, because they'd be answering the questions differently. But I think if they're allowed to be creative, it would be different. But it's hard work to actually sit around the table, so to speak, and be creative and allow that expression to begin to develop and see.
And this is what we're trying to do in our contextual theology or theology and mission programs at Northern Seminary, is give people give leaders the tools to understand culture and how we don't impose into a culture our preconceived histories, but we somehow have to enter into a dialogue to connect and interpret what we are trying to say about what we are and who Jesus is as the gospel in this place. I remember, so I wrote this book 10 years ago or so, Faithful Presence. It's of all my books, it's probably sold the most. And I used to think, oh, this means I can translate this 7 disciplines and this 3 circle model into this every time it works. I actually thought that. Okay. I was at a conference last summer, and I was a speaker, and they invited me up to the big speaker room, and there was like 100 speakers there, and I had people come up to me and say, "Oh my goodness, you're the guy that wrote that book. Here's what it did for me, and here's the church that was planted because of that book." And they told me about it. I go, "Huh? Is that what it looks like there?" And I must have had 6 or 7 episodes of that night. And what I'm trying to say is, this is something I've had to learn is that doesn't deny the faithfulness of those and the historic truth of those 7 disciplines down through 2,000 years. But the way they are organized, developed, and communicated and interpreted in cultural settings, and we are now in a multicultural, multiple cultures world now in North America. It used to be 50 years ago when there was a hegemonic white presence in this country. You could do a United Methodist Church in Oakville, Ontario, Canada, and then do it in Oak Brook, Illinois, and it would be exactly the same because the white hegemonic culture was all the same. People understood the same meanings and everything. That largely doesn't exist. Mike Moore, I can see you're on edge. You want to say something?
No, I agree. I was just impressed that you did the oak and the oak off the top of your head. So
that was also very impressive. Yeah.
I may be old, but I still got some wit, is what you're saying?
That's right. You still got it.
Yeah, that would have taken me. I would have had to have gotten my phone out to find another oak for sure.
I have 2 questions. One about Northern, and then one I've been kind of dying to ask Fitch about power and postmodern, particularly Richard Rorty, and how he understands his own work interacting with that. But
one of the things good for you to die, Eric. So you should really ask the question.
Well, one thing. So seminary-wise, my experience, and we've sent a number of people to different seminaries, from Regent to Covenant. I don't know a lot about Northern, but is it set up in a way to help people learn to work with people, engage people, bring people in?
Well, Mike Moore's probably the one to answer all these questions, right? But I just say this: seminaries for years, the disciplines of seminary are notoriously disconnected from real life. The average faculty person from the last 50 to 100 years in seminary is built like a university professor.
Right.
And their goals are to teach and write out of a basement, preferably a basement with a huge library. And all I can say is that's created a system, the old system of let's learn Bible, let's learn Old Testament, New Testament, let's learn and I believe systematic theology is still important, even though it gets a rip. But you got to understand the questions of theology, and then the ministerial courses. They give it a good try, but is it good training? I don't know. But that old system actually worked when everybody was a well-trained Christian who went to church every Sunday and who knew the hymns and knew the routine, and all you had to do was reinforce what was already there. That world is largely gone. Mm-hmm. And so now theology and mission is all about, like the first thing we do in the sexuality course, which starts this Monday, by the way, first thing I do, I now call it Christian sexuality in American culture. The first thing we learn to do is you can't assume these categories of sexuality, LGBTQIA+. You can't assume you know what that means. Ideologically, it has become a signifier, but you don't know anything about the sexuality and the experience and the struggle and the pain of the person that's sitting in front of you or in the pew. And so you're talking right past them. And the scripture has plenty to say about sexuality, but what it says cannot be assumed to connect with. So we need to learn how to listen, understand the issues of self, power, language. I always use people. If you've heard me say this before, I've said it thousands of times. To be gay in Chicago depends on where you're located. If you're gay in Hyde Park, South Side, University of Chicago, that's a very political configuration. It means a lot more than just I had sex with somebody of the same sex, etc. If you're gay in Wheaton, Illinois, which is a suburb, a cluster of evangelical, it means I want to be married and gay. Okay, but the problem is the people in Hyde Park think marriage is the worst thing for somebody being gay. Okay, so if you're saying you need to be married or you can't be married, they don't care. You just talked over them. If you go up to Belmont Ave, it's all about sex. And all I'm saying is you've got to listen. And by the way, all of the histories of abuse, pain, struggle is all wound up in those stories. Do you think you can transfer some information from Romans chapter 1 and solve somebody's sex issues with the gospel? No. So culture is so manifestly more complex, and that's why we did the Theology and Mission program. Mike Moore, you want to chime in?
Yeah, that was. I mean, that fills it out quite a bit. Maybe I'll give it a little more of an administrative angle, Eric. Well, before I do that, I was talking to a pastor who also teaches at Northern. He was naming a few seminaries he sent his staff to, and then he said, "When they come back, they're of no use to me." He's like, "Oh, great! I'm so glad we did this. I'm so glad we paid for that, and now you're of no use whatsoever," which is sad and unfortunate. I will say at Northern, when we're designing the curriculum, the classes, we have our faculty. And then we have our affiliates, our adjuncts. But there's two things I asked to begin the conversation. One is, do you have expertise in your field? And then two, tell me about the church that you go to. What is your role at that church? What are you doing in that church? If it's like, well, yeah, we're kind of in between. We're trying to you're probably going to be disqualified from teaching at Northern. Okay. We actually, finding an adjunct to teach an Old Testament class, had a great conversation with somebody who's in Philly who unfortunately can't teach it. But she was discussing to me like her church there in Philly and what she's doing and how long she's been there. And that was actually a majority of the conversation because I can read her material on the Old Testament. I know she's a theological fit. But if the people teaching don't have those things, then they're not going to fit at Northern. And then I would actually also say for the staff as well, like our staff is like church planners, pastors, people who are in the church every single week. So I do think that sets us apart. We've stepped away from the professionalization of seminary, and we're again trying to move more and more to the church.
And we still got our hurdles to cross. Yeah. Our issues. We're struggling with this all the time. Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. Eric had one more question for you, Fitch.
Well, I so this is, and I'm kind of out of my league here, but when I listen to you talk, this would sound funny, but you sound very postmodern until you land the plane a lot of the time. And that you use language in a way to build realities before you get to a true reality a lot of times. And so I was just curious, like, I don't know, if you could just talk a little bit about I know that may not have made a lot of sense, but it's just kind of the gut experience of listening to you.
Yeah. No, you are 100% right about my intellectual commitments here. Well, our program, you could say that what I teach at Northern is theology, culture studies, and mission. And culture studies for me are the post-structuralists that have influenced me so much to understand reality. I am deeply in the weeds here because I see our culture as up for grabs.
Yeah.
And so for me, I've got to understand. So post-Marxism, folks, don't get turned off if you heard the word Marxism, but post-Marxist thinkers play a big role in me understanding what's going on. And I'll tell you why you probably need to understand it. It's because during World War II, Germany, 17 million Lutherans went Heil Hitler to Hitler, to raise their arm and said Heil Hitler. And the Jewish people, intellectuals, are going, what the hell's going on here? We got Christians giving their allegiance to Hitler. And so those people went to France, and they got chased out of France by the Nazis and went to Columbia University, the so-called Frankfurt School. They started to understand what's going on in a culture that can turn Christians into Nazis. I'm asking myself this question today. What's going on in our culture that can turn Christians, and I don't want to say who, but we have our allegiances strangely to everything but Jesus. And so ideologically, we got to understand how that works, or else pastors are going to get caught up in that. So I want to understand ideologically. I want to understand how language works to form and shape realities. We're no longer in one culture. We're in multiple cultures. You could get away without asking these questions 50 years ago or 75 years ago when, as I said, we were kind of a Euro-hegemonic culture, and the minorities stayed minorities in their corner. And if you're a white person like me, you don't even have to think about them because they're over there and they're not here. Okay. And that's not right, but still that's the way it was, and we could get away with it, etc. And so where I'm at right now is I want us to understand all of sociology, not all of it, enough sociology, enough post-structuralism, enough culture studies to be able to diagnose what is happening. But none of this is going to help you. None of this is going to solve the problems of the world. Sociology is not going to solve. We had Gerardo Marti at the lectures last year, and we dissected all the sociological forces that made the Glass Cathedral and Robert Schuller and all. It was fascinating. But and they said it was almost like this. The two sociologists end up saying, and this is the way it is. I go, what are you talking about? This is the way it is. This is just the way it works. I don't know how to get out of this. Well, have you ever considered Jesus? Jesus. Okay. So sociology will help us figure out what's going on. Post-structuralist studies, linguistic, philosophy. Understanding the self is so important today. Evangelicals have an assumed self that is so disconnected from the ways our young people are growing up thinking about themselves. And if we don't connect, then we're going to lose them. And the gospel is not going to be communicated. And so all those things are good diagnoses to lead us to the answer. And that's what the theology and mission course is all about. Understand your culture, understand the people, understand the questions, understand how they see and understand power, so that we can speak the gospel in a way that connects and is the answer to a question they're asking, not a question no one's asking.
Thanks. That's good. Appreciate that.
We probably shouldn't have a 2-hour podcast.
No.
Overall. And so okay, Mike, if you were to walk out of a door at Northern Seminary and there was a group of students who'd been listening to us through the door, and they said, Mr. Dean of the seminary, what were you all just talking about? Could you sum that up for us? And why did that conversation just happen? And what does it mean? What would you say?
These are current students or prospective students?
Oh, let's go prospective students.
Oh man, well then I'd say here's a free coupon for your application. You got to enroll. But if I was going to take the business hat off, I guess I would just start with asking them what is the disruption in their ministry context, because I do think that's what we're ultimately talking about.
Yeah.
Everybody has something disruptive in their church, in their family, in their life, and I think what Northern does is we try to deal with the disruptions in a way that points people to Jesus. And again, to Fitch's part, there are constant disruptions, but we're inviting people to explore that with Jesus, trusting that God is up to something. And that's what we're talking about. I mean, it's pretty ordinary. I think that's kind of the beautiful thing about your all's podcast is it's quite ordinary in the best sense, and their ordinary disruptions are where we think God wants to meet them.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. I think we could land the plane right there. Fitch, a final word? You're leaning into that microphone.
I cannot wait to connect with you two on the ground somewhere in Arizona where the battery lasts longer than half a day in the car. Yeah. I can't wait to do that.
That'll be awesome.
Someday when it's when the wind is howling down the streets of Chicago and the snow flurries are where you've seen them for about a few weeks now and it's getting old, just book that ticket. But this time instead of Phoenix, you come to Tucson. That's
awesome.
Cool.
Looking
forward to it.
Home of the Chicago White Sox.
Former spring training home of the Chicago White Sox.
They aren't there anymore?
Fitch, I'm sorry to report, it's been a long time.
Yeah, we kicked them out.
Where are they now?
Phoenix.
Oh.
Yeah. They're sharing a facility with the Dodgers. One is more popular than the other in that facility. So, all right.
Well, hey guys, it was really good to meet you and hear your stories and be part of this. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Yes. Thanks for having us, Eric.
Thank you, guys. I enjoyed it immensely.
Awesome.
Great to hang with you all. Have a good day in Chicago. Day off of baseball, I believe. And I'll be there. Let's see, April 12 to 14. I'll be in Chicago.
Shoot us a message.
Maybe I will.
All
right.
All right. We'll see you guys. Bye.
You've been listening to Faith Over Breakfast and Theology on Mission, all in one podcast.
Yeah, thanks again to Mike and Fitch, as he is commonly called, for joining us today. And remember, go follow both of these podcasts. If you're not a follower, if you're not subscribed to Faith Over Breakfast, please do that. Do the same for Theology on Mission. Give us both glowing reviews. Anytime you share either of these podcasts on your feed or in your story, it gets us a lot more viewer or listeners, and that means a ton to us. I mean, we do this to talk to you all and to get in front of folks. So yeah, we would appreciate a share and a review.
Yeah, thank you very much.